Chapter 9 in histology deals with a review of the urinary system. And we first begin our tour of the urinary system by looking at the overall organization of the kidney. Anatomically, the kidney consists of an outer cortex and an inner medulla. The outer cortex is the major location of the glomeruli, the sites of filtration, basically, that form the ultrafiltrate that's going to be a major product of the kidney. The medulla contains mainly the loops of Henle and the extensions of the collecting ducts. At the apex of a renal pyramid in the medulla are the openings of the collecting ducts that release their urinary products into a series of minor calyces that then extend into a smaller number of major calyces. And the sum of the union of the major calyces forms the renal pelvis, which is the dilated upper portion of the ureter. In terms of the overall structure, the basic functional unit of the kidney is known as a uriniferous tubule. The uriniferous tubule begins at Bowman's capsule, where, in essence, Bowman's capsule has been infiltrated by a tuft of glomerular capillaries that are basically a capillary bed that are formed between an afferent and an efferent arteriole. Distal to Bowman's capsule is the opening of the proximal convoluted tubule, which you see just to the right of Bowman's capsule in the area of the cortex on this picture. Then, extending from the proximal tubule will be the components of a loop of Henle that you can see extending down into the deeper layers of the medulla. And then the loop of Henle, by its ascending limb, becomes continuous with the distal tubule, and the distal tubule empties into an arched component, which is a tributary of the collecting duct. And the collecting duct then basically will descend back down into the medulla to open onto the apex of a renal papilla into a minor calyx. Now, let's look at some of the detailed anatomy of Bowman's capsule and its relationship to the corresponding tuft of capillaries in the glomerulus. Note that the capillary tuft vaginated, in essence, what becomes the proximal part of the proximal convoluted tubule, in such a way that the tuft of capillaries come in close contact with a visceral layer of Bowman's capsule that is formed by the podocytes. And the podocytes, as we'll see, will form part of the filtration barrier that basically is interposed between the lumen of the capillaries and the urinary space. So the visceral layer, the functional layer of Bowman's capsule, is continuous with in essence, a simple squamous epithelium that lines the parietal layer. And as you can see in this picture, the parietal layer is directly continuous with the urinary pole at the beginning of the proximal convoluted tubule. Now, the box shows an area of tail that's illustrated at the bottom of the picture. And here you see a schematic diagram of literally the filtration barrier that's formed by a common basal lamina that's shared by a fenestrated capillary endothelium and by the foot processes of adjacent podocytes. And obviously, on either side of that shared basal lamina and its cell types is the lumen of the capillary itself, and on the other side of the podocyte foot processes is the lumen of what constitutes the urinary space. And the urinary space, as you can see, is where the ultrafiltrate of blood plasma first appears after it's passed through the filtration barrier and passes into the proximal convoluted tubule.